Pacers fans, we are back for yet another episode of the Pacers Post-Up. Ryan, it is good to be back in the saddle. I'm officially a dad. For those that are watching online, you can see the sign behind me. Welcome home, baby. Ellie, it has been a wild first week. I have a newfound respect for all of our parents in the audience. But what a blessing, what a joy. It has been an absolute pleasure to be Ellie's dad for the last week or so. And excited to be back behind the microphone. Shout out to Ryan for holding it down on some of the draft reaction, talking about the free agency landscape that really has started to heat up over the last couple of days. And, you know, the Pacers have had a lot of names rumored, and the contingency plan, if you will, that Rick Carlisle and Chad Buchanan had made reference to, really had to come into effect. Obviously, Braden Smith was not, great for the hometown kid, going to be on a two-way deal, made sense to shed the Cam Jones contract. All of that being true, that was not what this fan base was looking for going into the summer of 2026. And so what do you do to try and push things forward, particularly in an Eastern Conference now where it's not a cakewalk? And that's probably the biggest narrative kind of underpinning this entire free agency, that's kicked off over the last couple of days. So, Ryan, we got a lot to unpack. I don't want to labor on here in the intro. Where do we have to start?
Do we start with Kelly Oubre Jr., the signing? And I think we set the stage here because just reading the reaction of the room on this deal is a lot of Pacers fans are justifiably really excited, think this is a great move. And then there's another camp of Pacer basketball fans who are maybe a little disappointed that it wasn't a quote-unquote bigger move. And I absolutely find myself in the more excited camp. And I think hearing those rumors of the Trey Murphys and who can we go get and how many draft picks are we going to leverage, I didn't never really think that was going to be a realistic option. We see what small market teams do when they trade all their assets. It's hard to get players back. You have limited flexibility. That really only works when you have a big market, somewhere where you can always attract talent, and still doesn't usually work out in the long run. So I think the Pacers were smart to hold on to assets, but still fill the position of need. And yes, Kelly Oubre Jr. is 30 years old. He has some weaknesses, but damn do his strengths align exactly with what we need on this team. And ironically, his weaknesses are things our offensive drive and offensive unit and playmakers can probably overcome. So to outline the deal, we got Kelly Oubre Jr. on a 2-year, $19 million or $17 million deal. Pretty much fits in what we knew were going to be kind of at the mid-level exception. And what the Pacers are adding is now wing depth and truly that 6'8" wing defensive perimeter guy that we have been wanting and asking for when we have matchups that the Aaron Nesmith, the Andrew Nembhard, the ones who are called upon on that, just sometimes struggle with just based on the sheer fact that they're both under 6'6". Yeah. And we have seen Oubre go against some of the biggest names in the East. There's clips going around about how he's guarded Brunson and how he's calling him he's got a big head, but he's guarded Tatum. He's guarded, obviously all of them, Cade, Brown. And so we add in a massive piece that allows this roster to be even more flexible. Now, on the defensive end and on the offensive end, yes, the shooting inconsistent. We can get into those numbers, but he's a good transition finisher. He's athletic. He is good from the corner, as you noted in a tweet. I think he was 46 or 48% from deep in the corners on the left side. And he's a great cutter. So with playmakers around him, we're going to get him the efficient looks. And now on defense, we have another wing to lean on.
All right. To me, this is a savvy signing by this front office. Okay, is Kelly Oubre Jr. the Trey Murphy snag? No, but Kelly Oubre has scored 20-plus points per game in this league, and so I was having this conversation with somebody the other day where it's almost like the Mikal Bridges deal. Okay, Mikal Bridges was traded from Phoenix to Brooklyn. That second half of that season in Brooklyn, it was a small sample size, 20-some-odd games, averaged 26 points. Then the next year, averaged 20. He gets, the ridiculous trade package, 5 picks or whatever it was. and he was outplayed by Aaron Nesmith in the Eastern Conference Finals last year. I know the Knicks just won the title, so all is good in New York. They're happy they shipped out the picks and all of that. Winning cures it all. However, when you're talking about, we're not the Knicks. We are the small market team. We have to make cap-savvy moves that allow us to not forfeit the future, because we're not going to get the draw of the big name that's just going to say, hey, it's the Knicks, it's the Garden, I'm coming here. And I was never in on the Trey Murphy III. I mean, we went on to setting the pace with Alex Golden, and I was like, let's please stop talking about it. It just didn't feel like a Pacers kind of move. And this really does. You're replacing a lot of Mathurin's scoring, albeit in a different way, right? Oubre Jr. averaged about 14 points per game last year. You talk about the shooting numbers. Last year, I think it was somewhere around 36% from deep, very similar to Nembhard, Mathurin, things like that. But he was 46% from the corners on, I want to say, 87 attempts. I looked it up just because I knew that was something that was a part of his game. And I think about him as a cutter, as somebody who can run, transition, the floor spacing that you mentioned, and doing it for a price tag that fits right in to our the mid-level exception. We can create a little bit more room under the mid-level if we wanted to shed salary. We are in the luxury tax right now. I think Bobby Marks had it somewhere around $6.5 million. I'll be very curious to see if we make some secondary moves, how we view ourselves as are we going to pay the luxury? We're hard capped at the first apron because we are using this mid-level exception on Kelly Oubre Jr. But to me, of the names that were getting floated out there, the Josh Okogis of the world, I just was not really impressed by anybody else. This was the guy that I thought, okay, you start going down the list, versatile wing defender, check. And I did share out some of that basketball index stuff where he ranked in the 90th and 93rd percentile over the last two seasons in perimeter isolation defense. He can switch 1 through 4.
Yep.
And in today's NBA, if you look at just the teams that are out, the teams that were in the postseason, had success this year, Oklahoma City, almost everybody they put on the floor can defend, right? And then Lou Dort will get hot every now and then. Caruso will bang in a couple threes. Cason Wallace, whatever. But they all can play defense. And then the Spurs, the same thing. Vassell or Castle or whoever it is, they've got guys that can do it on that end. Even the Knicks, minus Brunson, you start talking about Bridges and OG. This is sort of a recipe that the Pacers have had guys that could do it, but not with the size. And as you start to look across the East now, Giannis in Miami, Kawhi in Toronto, Brown, who the hell knows where he's going to be, but Tatum in Boston. Obviously, the Knicks are the Knicks between Cat, OG, Brunson. And you mentioned Oubre having a little bit of time on Brunson in the playoffs this last year. So there's just a lot to like when you're talking about somebody that's going to basically make the same amount of money as Jarris Walker. So from a salary perspective, this is a huge win for us. And then does the Tyrese Haliburton, Rick Carlisle, Jenny Boucek effect take place here? And what I mean by that is we have seen guys come into this system and their efficiency rises because of coaching, because of scheme, because of incredible playmaking from guys like Haliburton, Nembhard, Siakam. I think it'll be very interesting to see how Zubac operates in the mid-post, particularly with Kelly Oubre's proficiency in the corners and him as a cutter, and Zoo's ability to kind of read that. I just think these are the moves that go unheralded. These are the moves that the talking heads don't care about because it's not splashy. But make no mistake about it, this Pacers team got better. And I think where I want you to kind of take us before we go around the horn, how do you view this signing in the context of the Zubac trade?
Well, it's just now an addition on top of it, because if you wait to make all these moves, and we'll talk about Kessler and how that has basically bankrupted the Lakers to a certain degree of assets and money and where they're going to be limited, this is an extension of that in terms that now that trade, you must include the idea of that flexibility in the cap room we cleared by getting Zubac on that team-friendly deal that he was with Clippers allowed you to go after a guy like Oubre. Because if you're going after a guy like Walker Kessler or other names, you don't have that flexibility. And so now what we've always said this whole time and why KP's trade was necessary, or not necessary, but so well thought out, was we were never taking Keaton Wagler in the draft. As much as that what if will live in Pacer Nation, and it should, he was never going to be on the roster. And if you waited until this offseason to make that move, that price tag might go up. You're competing with teams like Boston and the Lakers and all those to try to go after the most team-friendly, high-tier center that is available. And so you get him, and then you let Oubre come in and fill in for that Mathurin void. And yes, do I think Mathurin has talent probably better than Oubre to a certain degree? Yeah, but Oubre is a way better defender. Oubre is springier. I know Mathurin is probably more athletic overall, but he's springier, and he reads the game way better. We're going to see way more cuts from him. We're going to see, as you said, some of that isolation where does he fit in kind of the backdoor lob threat. And so KP knew that this was potentially coming. And to get a guy like this, when you look at the two ends of the floor, on defense, the fit is absolutely clear. We've talked about this. We need wing help. Jarris Walker wasn't doing it. Furphy was stepping into it, but we're going to have to see how his health returns. And now we have a third true perimeter defender. We really only had two guys we could rely on between Nembhard and Nesmith. And now you add another guy in the 90th percentile that you say who can switch and who has the length to actually guard these guys on a consistent basis, which is going just to allow the defensive schemes, the flexibility to increase. And then offensively, I think the fit is so much better because he was asked to do a lot more when he was in Charlotte, when he averaged 20 points. And last year when he started in Philadelphia while Paul George was on suspension or injured, he was asked to do so much more. And so now looking at him, we are only going to ask him to do the things he's efficient at. We know the bench still has plenty of scoring. TJ, Obi, there's your two-headed monster. Jay Huff gets hot from time to time. Kelly Oubre, we are bringing you in to be that high-energy, high-motor. In fact, he averaged over 30 minutes a game last year. I think that will drop to 25 on our team, maybe 24 depending on the night. We know Rick will ride the hot hand. But he's going to have the ability now to be a high-motor, high-efficiency, get into transition, help us get into transition. He was in the high percentage of steals last year at just under 1.5. And in transition, gosh, when you have TJ or Tyrese, whoever's running the gun, and you've got Obi and Kelly running side by side, I don't know how you defend it because both can flare out, both can cut to the rim. So it's going to be really effective, and he's good around the rim. He's effective, and he is now fitting into a role. And that's something we talk a lot about, of how this team makes total sense because everybody knows, given every night, what their role is. And Kelly Oubre's is 100% clear. When he's got it offensively, let it going, but we are going to use you when there are games and matchups, particularly when we get into the Eastern Conference playoffs, that he is going to be extraordinarily valuable. And to wrap that whole question up, it comes back to what you said, where if we don't make the trade when it happens before the deadline, this deal becomes much harder to pull off. And now we are able to do it because Zubac is in such a team-friendly deal. And when you look around the league, what these centers are getting, Zubac is better than almost all of them, if not all of them, and he's cheaper than most of them.
Right. Here's how I would frame the argument. You mentioned Keaton Wagler. Okay, so let's say we kept the 5th pick, right? And we have Keaton Wagler on the team. Or we actually got a top 4 pick. And let's say we drafted Caleb Wilson, all right? We didn't go our way. I think DeBonso was a next level. Him and Peterson maybe next level game changer. But there was a lot of intrigue around Caleb Wilson, okay? This is not a draft podcast, but bear with me for the sake of argument here. If either of those two guys are on this team, Wagler or Wilson, in this 2-year title window, are we better than we are signing Kelly Oubre Jr.? Because the money that we would have spent on those two guys, or one of them, had we drafted them, is essentially, it's not dollar for dollar, but that's the money that we're now utilizing to sign Kelly Oubre Jr. I think Caleb Wilson could be a hell of a talent, right? But he is super raw. And so you're talking about a team that is in win-now mode, and I'm not sure that if Caleb Wilson was on this team right now, we are better for 2026, 2027 than if we would be filling this role with Kelly Oubre. Am I nuts to say that?
I will pull back a little bit because I think Wilson's going to be a heck of a defensive prospect. Is he as ready? I mean, will he be in the 90th percentile next year on perimeter defense and some of the things we've already talked about with Kelly Oubre? Probably not. That's a high bar for any rookie. The one thing I'll even say to that is Kevin Pritchard's deal made it possible to have both. That was always why we did it before. Yeah. And so I think it's just one of those Pacer fans, when you sit back and look at this move, it's kind of a fringe move in the sense that he's probably our 8th option offensively coming off the bench now. But what an 8th option. When you look down our roster from starting unit and now our bench unit, we are better defensively, we're going to be better offensively, and we have depth still that if you're looking around the East, and we're going to talk about this, Cleveland is losing players left and right. Detroit is losing players left and right. The Knicks just lost a big key, their best bench player in Mitchell Robinson, although he went to an Eastern Conference competitor. But looking at this, that is one of the strengths we've had, and Kelly Oubre propels us to a new unit. And I just keep going back to the flexibility we have, and Rick Carlisle and this coaching staff now has to be able to play big, to play wings, to play small even with Kelly. This opens up more avenues, and it is not, again, the one that I think Pacer fans, the flashy, but you have to remember, now we have a solidified 9 to 10, 11-man roster for the regular season going in. We'll see where Shepard, Walker, and Furphy all fit in, and we'll definitely talk about that. But we've got our top 9 guys that we want to roll with, and we still have assets for later, depending on the team meshes and what we need to do to make the future move. And if we waited until this offseason to do all these trades and deals, that might not have been the case.
All right, I agree. And here's my point. I would rather have Caleb Wilson, yes. I would not rather have Keaton Wagler going into this next year. Okay, so that's that's the pick that we gave up. We had the 5th pick. And to me, if you're trying to win a title in the next 2 years, you would rather have Kelly Oubre on this deal than Keaton Wagler. That's the argument that I make. Maybe some people push back on that, but this is a bona fide starter. He has started playoff minutes. He has guarded Jalen Brunson. That's a different kind of thing for a rookie who's played 1 year in college, 2 years in college, whatever it may be. So here nor there, it's a savvy signing. It's not a sexy signing necessarily, but it's one that makes this team better and just fits right in line with what we're trying to clearly do over the next couple of seasons. And I think that's the perfect segue to, again, I'm not just trying to sit here and, Kevin Pritchard and Chad Buchanan, more flowers, but let's talk about some other things going on around the league. LeBron James, as he always does, decides to make this whole thing about him and, his kid's contract, and you touched on that, I think, in the episode that you recorded yesterday. And so it's like, listen, I don't want to talk about LeBron. There were a lot of people on Twitter talking about, bring him to Indy. No, I'm out. I would feel so conflicted if we won a championship and it was with LeBron on this team. I wouldn't touch that transaction with a 10-foot pole. However, it is interesting conversation around what the Lakers are doing. Yeah. And I think it matters to talk about this because of the Zubac trade and what, all the criticism that our front office was getting and the price tag and this, that, and the other. It sounds like, Ryan, we've heard this report from a number of people during the trade deadline this last season. We had made a significant push for 2 guys, Ivica Zubac and Walker Kessler. Yeah. And now we are seeing really what the market was able to bear for Walker Kessler, and good for him, 4 years, $32.5 million a year. Steep price tag that the Lakers paid, because it's not just the money that they are locked into, it's also the picks and the swaps, and it really puts into perspective kind of how team-friendly the Zoo deal is. You don't get a Kelly Oubre Jr. if you're signing Walker Kessler to this kind of deal. So just wanted to get your reaction on how all that went down and relative to where we stand now today with Zoo.
Well, yeah, looking at the Walker Kessler deal, they gave up 2 first-round picks unprotected. I think it's 2031, 2033, don't quote me, and then 2 swaps in there. So they've now leveraged out 4 picks that they can't move now. And thinking back again, remember, Pacer fans, right now we only have 1 pick outstanding left to the Clippers in 2029, which is right in this 2-year window that we've talked a lot about. Yeah. And you made the best point where it's nearly $12 million more per year. Kelly Oubre is making 8.5, whatever it is when the math comes out. And so you look at these deals and what people have to pay for these premiums, and the initial reaction for the Zubac trade was it was so much, but we knew Mathurin and Jackson were gone anyway. We had to get off their contract, so we couldn't have come into restricted free agency with them. And then we knew that this pick, if it didn't fall in the top 4, was going to be our asset. And so looking at the Lakers, they've made some other deals. They got Quentin Grimes on a 4-year deal. They added, who's the list? I'm missing
Colin Sexton.
Colin Sexton.
Obviously, the Reeves contract was already in place.
Extension.
Yeah.
But it shows the market of where, I mean, they value. And yes, Kessler is younger and has a little bit of a roadmap, and they kind of view him as a cornerstone to grow next to Luka. But my argument would be with the Lakers, they're ready to win right now. And transparently, if you're telling me going into next season I could just have one of them, and this is why we ranked Zubac a little bit higher than Kessler.
Yeah.
Kessler's health is a little bit concerning. His fit, his play style, yes, he started to show some signs of adding some outside shot, but all small sample size. Where Zoo brings an element of just size, spacing, screen setting that Kessler has not grown into yet. And big game experience, all that. And so good for Kessler and their agents to working out. I mean, it sounded like the Jazz didn't want to do it, but also good on the Jazz because they got a hell of a deal for their return, and they've got a lot of front court depth anyway, so I think it'll work out for them. But this is just the motion when we see all these moves go down. You are not getting a price tag for a top 10 center in this league that has the durability and play style and fit that Zubac brings without giving up huge assets and huge money. And yes, the top 5 pick is a large asset, but it's not it's always, the picks are always one of those things, the what ifs. You know, the potential is always bigger. We needed somebody now, and we got him.
Yeah, and Ryan, we did that. I don't want to unpack all that here. We did the exercise of let's look at the 4th overall pick historically. Yeah. Let's look at the 5th. These are you're lucky if you're batting 500 on some of these picks. This is not the number 1 or number 2 overall selection. And listen, I hope Pete Wagler has a great career and he's out west, and it doesn't really matter from Pacers' perspective. You said it. We got our guy, and we are now primed to make a push here for these next couple of years. And I have to, this is where we got to pivot the conversation, because we kicked off the show teasing a little bit of what's going on around the league.
Yep.
Obviously, we've heard of, the Giannis was first domino, Kawhi gets moved, some fringe moves for competitors in the East, mainly with Mitchell Robinson going to Boston. Knicks get worse, frankly. Yeah. They bring back Huck Porty, who I don't know how you feel about that, but Boston certainly gets better. Ryan, I'm looking here because the East is seemingly on the move, okay? Yeah. The Pacers were a game away and a torn Achilles away from winning the finals 2 years ago. Obviously the down year this year. We're talking about a bona fide top 10 center shoring up this roster, Kelly Oubre Jr., a starter in this league that's going to play probably a bench role. We didn't really talk about that. I've heard some people say, does he supplant Nesmith? No, I don't think that's really a conversation at this point. Let me ask you this. Just to kind of start talking around the East, where do you think that the Pacers currently are on FanDuel odds to win, just in terms of rank, to win the Eastern Conference next year?
They're going to have the Celtics above. They'll have the Knicks. They'll probably still have the Cavs, which is ridiculous, even if they get LeBron. They'll have the Pistons, so where does I put them? 5th on my guess.
Right, they are 8th overall on the list. There is absolutely... Listen, I'm going to look right into the camera. If you are a Pacers fan, okay, the disrespect that this franchise has gotten, and I know this is odds makers and it's, there's more so about money coming in, but forget about it. The disrespect to Indiana for years, it is so ridiculous that we just continue to be overlooked, that we have one of the best front offices in the league. They make cap-savvy moves. They make the transactions that we've made for guys like Haliburton and Siakam, the Bruce Brown signing. We can talk about Norm Powell here in a minute because it's a very similar deal in Chicago. But all of, Paul George has to leave. The sky is falling. We turn it into Domas and Vic. Then same deal. We turn it into Tyrese. It's like we always have found a way to stay competitive, and we just get no respect. I mean, they have the Sixers ahead of us. They have 2 of the worst 5 contracts in the league. Yeah. And I just don't understand. You mentioned Cleveland. Maybe they're building in some money here thinking, okay, what if LeBron goes to Cleveland? And so they're factoring that in. Toronto, I get it, but I still don't really love their guard play. Kawhi's a bit... Let's get to some of that in a minute. I don't want to get totally off course here, but it is interesting to me that that's where the Pacers fall. And it's plus 1,400 for those that are wondering. Go put your money on it, because I would not be surprised if this team comes out of the East next year. Who got better? Who is somebody now in the East that scares you that we weren't even talking about before?
That we weren't talking about before. Oh, I don't. Well, are you trying to lead into the Hornets? Because I'm not necessarily sure right now they've taken a massive leap. I like the move of getting off LaMelo Ball. I talked about that on an earlier podcast, so feel free. I don't really know the Wolves' fit. We'll see with that. I think the Bulls did take a step back into the mediocrity bowl a little bit. Not for the hypothetical there, but we know the Bulls kind of live in this, like, do they want to tank? Do they want to be good? Now it's Giddey, Wilson, it's Powell, and Powell was a good signing. I mean, an all-star last year, albeit a fringe all-star, but earned it, played really well for the Heat, really dynamic scorer, add some things to his game. I think the Bulls are way more competitive. I think, the thing that I guess I'll answer, because I don't have a team that answers that question well, is a lot of these fringe teams bolster. I mean, it's clear. The Raptors got better. The Heat got better. The Bulls got better. The Hornets probably maybe got better, subtraction. We'll see where that kind of irons out with the new fit of their roster. So all these teams got better. The thing that I'll say in reverse is the Knicks are clearly now worse. I will just say we know it's hard to come off of a season with a championship, plus losing Mitchell Robinson, who is a huge piece for them, especially Karl Anthony Towns, always in foul trouble. That's going to be a piece they're going to have to figure out and really don't have a lot of flexibility to change. So I think they've gotten slightly worse. The Pistons have lost Tobias Harris now. They didn't get any of the big names. Duren is still on the market. We'll see where he lands. That could get really interesting and dicey, and even with the way Duren played, is it even a big win if they get him back? I mean, clearly they want him back. You don't want to lose an all-star center, but I think they are trending in the wrong direction. The Cavs, I'm transparent. They've lost their depth. The Keon Ellis deal they tried to make, he's gone. Dean Wade, he's gone. Yeah, those pieces aren't huge, but those are guys that they brought in for the defensive end. Now, even if you add LeBron, are you telling me that a Mitchell, Harden, LeBron lineup scares you defensively? No. I don't care if they have Evan Mobley and Jared Allen, who are both, Evan Mobley's a high-tier defender. Allen's probably right in kind of the middle to a plus defender, but that lineup doesn't scare me defensively. You can run around them. None of them can, and I know LeBron kind of has the switch, but his defensive switch has really tanked over the last couple of years. He really just reads and lives reading the game, needs defenders around him. So you look around that league, and the East top tier has slowly crawled back. We just have more of a middle tier making a push. And the last team to talk about there would be Boston, which the Mitchell Robinson, if healthy, is a big signing for them. They'll kind of have still a center by committee because that's Mitchell Robinson's role, and you can basically hack a shack him. But they did get better. However, what is this Jaylen? Like, does Jaylen Brown want to play? Are they going to take him into the season? There's a lot of controversy. How is him and Tatum's relationship? Like, there are these massive question marks. And we are just looming here with, there are very few teams that you can sit back and say they have championship experience, they've had a core now in place, albeit there are changes, but a core in place that we've had now for 2 or 3 years, great coaching staff, and high-level winning stars. Like, we are now fitting in, and yes, getting stars moved in the Heat, and I think Kawhi and the Raptors is going to be really interesting. We'll see what moves they do. There's a lot of health question marks. There's a lot going on. And the East is flattening. So the longest-winded answer I could give to that, did you have a team in mind you wanted to go to?
No, I think for me it's Boston, okay? That I hear you on the Kawhi thing to Toronto. And I do think, you mentioned it, that the Bulls did some, the Bulls and the word savvy are not things that I normally say, but they have made some savvy moves. They didn't try to get cute with the draft pick. They took the best guy, Caleb Wilson, and that, I'm not saying, that's hard to do sometimes. Front offices, I think, do try to get cute. So I give them a lot of credit for that. They've talked about, the Kings, dear Lord. They've talked about Giddey as being their kind of Tyrese Haliburton. Not that level of player, but a good player, a guy that's a bigger guard that fills it, near triple-double kind of, he gets the rebounds, assists, whatever. But then you make the Norm Powell move. And I know there were some rumblings behind the scenes, was texting with some people today, that maybe there were thoughts that Powell could be a target for us. make no mistake, we would have had to move pieces out. There was no way we were getting there money-wise. He would have had to have taken a significant discount, probably would have had to shed some salary to try to get to the full mid-level, and that still would have been, millions short of what he signed 2 years, $45 million in Chicago. And let's not forget, one of the centers that we talked about going into the trade deadline last year was Nick Claxton in Brooklyn, who they basically get for nothing. Still a young guy. The contract's about $25 million a year. So the Bulls are trying to build something. I don't think they have the star power necessarily to compete with some of the teams that we're talking about in the East, but still interesting. Charlotte, young, still interesting. Magic, to me, are kind of a little bit lost in translation here. Obviously, new coach coming in. I don't know if they've really gotten better. The only Magic footnote I have is we had talked about Jonathan Isaac as maybe a third-string center. I know the injury history being there, but they cut him and signed him back. I don't know exactly. I'm sure there's some cap math there that we're not going to get into. But as I look at it, Philly doesn't scare me. We've talked ad nauseum about the Heat. I think, they make the signing for Tim Hardaway Jr. Okay, that's a good signing. I'm not going to argue that. I still don't think they're going to have enough depth to make the deep push. Kawhi in Toronto, I'll be curious how that all comes together. Great player, availability question marks. How does he work with Scotty Barnes, who is quickly really the point guard that they want to run with? I'm not sure that they have the total answer there. And then you get back into the teams that have kind of been at the top. Detroit's your defending regular season champ. You mentioned the Tobias Harris piece. Still question marks around Duren. Probably going to end up overpaying him, at least based on what he did in the postseason. Regular season, he probably earned the contract in the regular season and about lost it in the post.
Is he really better than Zoo, though?
No. I mean, and that's where, like Walker Kessler, is he really better than Zoo? He hasn't been available, and I don't know. That's where, again, it's always like the shiny new toy, like, oh, he's 7'1", he's young, he's trying to stretch the floor. Or Duren, he's Ben Wallace 2.0. Like, yeah, he's a good player, okay? But I don't want to be paying him what they're talking about paying him. And so then I come back to the teams that make savvy moves, and that's a team like Boston. And they needed a center. That was clear. That the Vucevic thing didn't work out. Keita's fine, but not a championship-level center. And you go get a guy in Robinson. You mentioned the foul stuff, the hack-a-shack. That's a real thing. But he's a guy that can come in for 22, 25 minutes a night and get you 8 offensive rebounds. And it flips the whole script, and he's versatile defensively. And Zoo's going to have his hands full. I mean, that's why you go get a guy like Zoo, because of guys like Robinson that are in the league. So that's a problem, I think. And depending upon what Jaylen Brown does or doesn't do, I'll be curious, how Boston's roster comes together. They're still, I think they have a pretty big trade exception. I don't know if they took Robinson into that. Is that?
I don't think so.
Okay, yeah, because he was a free agent.
Yeah,
I don't think they absorbed anything into their exception. It's interesting that exception kind of fits like a Trey Murphy type salary. So Boston's one to pay attention to. New York, I don't know how you argue that they got better. They re-signed Shamet. They get Huck Porty. What's the guy's name? Mohamed Diawara or whatever. Everybody's crazy about him. It's like, oh, he's Siakam. That's why they didn't want to play him, and we got him for cheap. We'll see. We've heard that story, a lot of times before. But I'll say this, Ryan. It makes for a lot of interesting conversation going into next season, because I don't know how you sit there and say any of these 8 teams that we're, because we're 8th, ridiculously, are the clear front runner. Even the Knicks as a defending title, they're not better than they were. So I've got a couple other little notes, but what else? Anything else you want to get to, just free agency-wise? Any other thoughts on, is there another move coming for the Pacers? That's probably the best question to finish with.
Yeah, I wouldn't be shocked. I think we'll probably hold pat. We seem to have kind of the rotation cleared out. I think the big move that people are going to start talking about is, where does Walker fit in the future? Where does he fit in the rotation? I think the Pacers will wait to see and probably wait for that chip to fall and the deadline. That could easily be something where the deadline comes. We love our rotation. He's fallen out of the rotation or was never really in the rotation. And we trade him for future assets, second-round picks, maybe a late first, to try to bolster up a later trade in another season. or we'll see something maybe along the guard level. I think we're going to maybe see where does Braden Smith kind of land in this. He's on a two-way deal. We still need probably a backup point guard if you don't have faith in him to back up TJ, just because we know these guys, it's going to be tough to play a full, 82 games and all that. So the backup guard position is probably where we can go get a guy on a vet, cheap deal that has some experience. But I think right now we can confidently say we know 80-90% of the Pacers roster.
Yeah. Are you sold on Potter and Huff?
I think that's got to be I think we knew that they were pretty happy with how they finished the season last year. We know with Potter, the shot was there. Huff, I think, is going to be the backup big. And I think knowing that our real play come the playoffs is going to be going smaller when we need to go away from Zoo with Obi and Pascal there. So, yeah, I think I'm fine with them going in. If we need to make that rough around the edge move, there are bigs. I mean, that's where we found them, on the market.
Yeah. It's going to be really interesting because, again, we're a tax-paying team right now. We've not historically been a tax-paying team. We have until the trade deadline next season to duck the tax. And I don't really care if we duck the tax or not.
Yeah.
I would want, if we're a title contending team, if this is the 2-year window to make the push, make the push.
Yeah.
That means going all in and pushing your chips in. Pay the tax, get up to that first apron, which we're now hard capped at. If we have to, because that's what you have to do. And that's what all these, whether it's New York, Boston, Detroit, that's what these teams are going to do to win a title. And I think we've got as good a chance as anybody. I got to get your reaction. We get news. It's probably, Ryan, we did our first ever episode of the Pacers Post-Up like a week after we got back from the in-season tournament in Las Vegas, the inaugural in-season tournament. That was the Bucks, the Lakers final, etc. Hell of a time. What an experience. To be there live was awesome, even though the building, particularly in that Bucks game, was a ghost town. Crickets, silent. I mean, you could hear us screaming from our seats when we were getting a little animated there. That was for those that don't remember, that was the Dame time, Tyrese, my time game. Still Ty's time, in my opinion. But here nor there, we get the announcement that Hinkle Fieldhouse will be the host of the NBA Cup this coming season. Ryan, this was out of left field for me. I knew they were looking to change up the venue, that they didn't love the neutral site in Vegas, didn't necessarily want to just host it at teams' arenas. But to go find one of the most historic basketball venues in the basketball state of basketball states. Yeah. What a cool thing for the city. Indianapolis continues to put itself on the map as one of the top sports destinations in the country, whether it's Final Four, Super Bowl, NFL Combine, you name it. Name me a better city. I mean, I know people, LA, New York. Okay, I've been to those cities. It's not set up the same. It's not walkable. Safety is a concern. I mean, there's all kinds of things. What say you about the recent announcement that the league's NBA Cup is coming here to Hinkle Fieldhouse?
It's fucking awesome. I mean,
it's incredible.
It's going to be. We had a blast in Vegas, and Vegas did a good job. But you have said this. There is a reason Indy gets these events all the time. We see it time and time over again, and it's because we crush these events. And I don't care what people out there saying, well, attendance might be down in the numbers. Well, I don't know if you went to Vegas. Attendance was garbage anyway. Yeah. People were not showing up to these games. We will pack Hinkle Fieldhouse. Everybody will be invested in this. I don't know if you saw our draw for the cup is incredible. It's tough.
Group of death is what they call it.
Yeah, it's going to be really fun to see who comes out of that, which actually the group of death could, because you might be able to just win a couple games and work your way into the finals somehow. So this is going to be must watch. I've already had more people who aren't even huge NBA fans reach out and are going to be, these tickets are going to go quick. I'm sure we'll be up at midnight or whenever they release them because it will be can't miss. And Hinkle is awesome. Anybody who goes there knows this. Yes, you can make all the, it's old, it's incredible venue. It is going to be loud as hell in there, and hopefully we get a great game.
Yeah, I mean, Ryan, I'm looking at this group. You mentioned it. We're Group B in the East. Knicks, Cavs, Sixers, Heat, Pacers. All of them are favored higher than us to win the East next year, which is absolute, it's just ludicrous. I just can't. Stuff like this just drives me nuts, and that's why I'm like, I know it's league year just opened. Like, this is the new league year. It's today. We're recording this. I am itching to get back to basketball. We saw the interview at Ty's basketball camp. He was like, "Are you happy for those guys?" He's like, "Yeah, whatever." You know, I mean, Tyrese, and this is why this stuff just chaps my ass. Tyrese should be the absolute bona fide face of this league. Like, he has a phenomenal soundbite. He's never getting into any trouble. He plays the villain card to a T when he needs to, and then turns around and smiles at you coming down the floor. Like, everything that he does is spot on. But we're in Indianapolis. And, like, can we just cut the shit? Like, we have had every major event in this market and pulled it off brilliantly. It's time to put some respect on this city. It's time to put some respect on this franchise. And more than anything, I will never, I say never, I doubt I will ever have any better basketball memories than I did last year because of the way that run went down. I don't know how you possibly top it from an experience perspective. I want the title so we can stop this disrespectful conversation towards Indy, so that we don't sit behind the Philadelphia 76ers as the 8th best odds to win the title next year. It is absolutely fucking ridiculous. And I'm done with the disrespect. This front office doesn't deserve it. This team doesn't deserve it. I'm ready to go play some basketball. So anything else, Ryan, before we wrap this thing up?
Tyrese Haliburton with a chip on his shoulder. That's dangerous. That's
what we got next year. So this can't come soon enough. We've got plenty now to talk about. There's more dominoes to fall. We'll get the ridiculous LeBron signing, the documentary for every game. Puke in my mouth. I could care less about that. I hope that he goes back to Cleveland and we beat their ass up and down the floor. We'll get to that. I gotta take a deep breath. This is my first episode back as a dad. I haven't slept more than 4 hours in like a week and a half, so bear with us, Pacers fans. We're gonna be covering it all right here on the Pacers Post Up, at Pacers Post Up on Twitter. Brought to you by Believe, FanDuel. Appreciate you guys listening. As always, go Pacers.